The wedding was perfect. At least, that's what everyone kept saying. The flowers looked beautiful. Soft white roses covered the garden like fresh snow. Golden lights hung gently above the guests. Music floated quietly through the evening air. People smiled, laughed, took photos. Everything looked exactly like the kind of wedding people dream about for years. And standing behind the bridal room door, Sophia tried to convince herself she was happy too. She adjusted her dress slowly in the mirror. Her hands were trembling, not enough for people to notice, but enough for her to feel it. Her maid of honor, Rachel, smiled warmly. "You look unbelievable," she whispered. Sophia forced a small smile. "Thanks," but something felt strange, not wrong, just heavy, like her heart was carrying something the rest of the room couldn't see. Outside, guests were beginning to sit down. The ceremony would start in less than 10 minutes. Rachel stepped closer carefully. "You nervous?" Sophia laughed softly. "A little. That's normal." "No," Sophia said quietly. "This feels different." Rachel looked at her for a moment, but didn't push further, because deep down, she already knew why. Sophia walked slowly toward the window. From inside the bridal room, she could see the ceremony area clearly. Couples sat together. Families smiled. Children ran around excitedly. And everywhere she looked, she saw fathers. One father fixing his daughter's hair. Another adjusting his tie nervously. One older man holding tissues already preparing to cry before the ceremony even started. Sophia looked away immediately. Her chest tightened. 3 years. It had already been 3 years. But grief was strange. Sometimes it felt distant. And sometimes it returned all at once without warning. Like tonight. Rachel noticed the silence. "You don't have to do this if it's too hard," she said gently. Sophia shook her head quickly. "No, I want this." And she meant it. She loved Daniel. She truly did. He was patient, kind, calm in the ways she wasn't. He loved her through anxiety, through sadness, through the difficult years after her father died. He never tried to fix her pain. He simply stayed. And somehow, that made all the difference. Still, there was one thing Daniel could never heal for her: regret. A knock interrupted the silence. 5 minutes! Sophia took a deep breath. Rachel smiled softly. "You ready?" Sophia nodded slowly. But before answering, her eyes drifted toward the ceremony chairs outside. And that's when she saw it. One empty chair. Second row, white ribbon tied around it. A single white rose resting gently on the seat. Sophia froze instantly. The room suddenly felt quiet, too quiet. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat didn't. Everything around her blurred slightly as she stared at the chair, because that chair wasn't supposed to be empty. That chair belonged to her father. The memories came back immediately, not slowly, all at once, like opening a locked room inside her heart. Sophia used to believe her father was the strongest man alive. When she was little, he could fix anything. Broken toys, bad days, nightmares. Even thunderstorms stopped feeling scary when he was around. Every Saturday morning, he took her to a small diner near their house. Same booth, same pancakes, same terrible jokes. "You know why pancakes are better than waffles?" he would ask every week. Sophia would roll her eyes. "Why?" "Because pancakes don't have emotional walls." And every single time, he laughed at his own joke before she could respond. Back then, life felt simple, safe, permanent. But people change as they grow older. Or maybe, they simply become more honest about who they are. Sophia became independent, ambitious. She wanted more from life than their small hometown could offer. Her father didn't understand that. To him, home was enough, stability was enough, safety was enough. But Sophia wanted movement, adventure, freedom, and eventually, those differences slowly became distance. When she met Daniel, things became even more complicated. Her father liked him at first, until Daniel mentioned moving across the country for work. That's when everything changed. Sophia still remembered the exact night of the argument, rain hitting the windows, cold dinner sitting untouched on the table, her father pacing across the kitchen. "You barely know this man," he said sharply. "We've been together 2 years, Sophia replied. "That's not enough. You don't get to decide that. I'm trying to protect you." "No," Sophia snapped. "You're trying to control me." Her father looked stunned, and somehow, that made her even angrier. Years of frustration suddenly exploded out of her all at once. "You never trust my decisions." "That's not true." "Yes, it is. I just don't want you ruining your life over emotions." Sophia laughed bitterly. "You know what? Maybe my life would actually improve if you stopped trying to live it for me." The room fell silent immediately. Her father stopped moving. For a moment, he looked smaller somehow, not angry, not loud, just hurt, deeply hurt. Sophia remembered seeing pain in his eyes, real pain, but neither of them apologized. Not then, not later. And sometimes one moment of pride creates years of silence. The wedding was perfect. Until the bride saw an empty chair at first. It felt temporary. A few missed calls, a few ignored messages, a little space to cool down. That's what Sophia told herself anyway. But pride is dangerous, because the longer silence lasts, the harder it becomes to break. A week after the argument, her father sent her a simple message. "Hope you got home safe." Sophia stared at it for a long time. She wanted to respond. She almost did, but the anger inside her was still fresh. So instead, she locked her phone and ignored it. She told herself, he should apologize first. And somewhere else in the city, her father was probably thinking the exact same thing. Days passed, then weeks. Eventually, Sophia moved away with Daniel. New city, new apartment, new life. At first, everything felt exciting. Late-night drives, tiny coffee shops, building a future together. Daniel noticed she avoided talking about her father. Whenever his name came up, her entire mood changed. "You miss him," Daniel said one night quietly. Sophia shrugged. "It's complicated. Complicated doesn't mean impossible." She didn't answer, because deep down, she knew he was right. Sometimes late at night, Sophia opened her father's contact just to stare at it. She even typed messages a few times. "Hey, I'm sorry." But she never sent them. Something always stopped her. Fear, ego. The uncomfortable possibility that maybe he was still angry too. Months later, Sophia got promoted at work. It was the kind of achievement she used to dream about as a teenager. The first person she wanted to tell was her father. That realization hit her harder than she expected. She sat in her office, staring at her phone for nearly 20 minutes. Then finally, she called him. Her heart pounded loudly while it rang. Once, twice, 3 times. No answer. She almost left a voicemail. But instead, she hung up. "Maybe later," she whispered to herself. But later never came. Life continued moving forward. That's the strange thing about life. Even during heartbreak, the world keeps going. People still go to work. Traffic still moves. Birthdays still happen. And slowly, distance becomes routine. One winter evening, Daniel found Sophia sitting quietly on the couch, staring at an old childhood photo. Her father stood beside her in the picture, both of them smiling widely. "You should call him," Daniel said gently. Sophia sighed. "I don't even know what I'd say anymore. The truth." She looked down. "What if he doesn't want to hear it?" Daniel sat beside her carefully. Sometimes people wait their whole lives for a conversation the other person is also afraid to start. That sentence stayed in her mind for days. A few weeks later, Sophia finally decided she was ready. She even practiced what she wanted to say. During the drive home from work, she imagined hearing his voice again. Maybe awkward at first, maybe emotional, but fixable. Everything felt fixable, until her phone rang. It was her aunt. Sophia smiled softly before answering. But the second she heard her aunt crying, her stomach dropped. And then came the sentence that changed everything. "Sweetheart, your father passed away last night." Sophia stopped breathing. Not literally, but emotionally, like her mind suddenly disconnected from reality. "No," she whispered instantly. "No, no." Her aunt kept talking softly through tears. Something about his heart, something about peaceful sleep. But Sophia barely heard any of it, because one thought kept repeating inside her head. "I waited too long." The funeral felt unreal. People hugged her, spoke softly, offered condolences, but everything sounded distant, like underwater noise. Sophia stood beside the casket, unable to process what she was seeing. Her father looked peaceful, and somehow, that made it hurt even more, because she realized something terrible. This was the first time she had seen him in 3 years, and he couldn't speak anymore. During the service, people shared stories about him. A neighbor talked about how he secretly paid for groceries when families struggled. An old coworker described him as the most dependable man in the building. Someone else laughed while remembering his terrible pancake jokes. Sophia smiled through tears at that one. But then, an older woman approached her quietly afterward. "I worked with your father," she said softly. Sophia nodded politely. The woman hesitated before continuing. "He talked about you all the time." Sophia froze. "What?" The woman smiled sadly. "He was proud of you." Sophia felt her throat tighten instantly. "He kept your graduation picture in his wallet," the woman continued. "He showed it to everyone." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, because her father never said those things directly. Not once. And suddenly, she realized something heartbreaking. Some people love deeply, but struggle to express it properly. That night, after the funeral, Sophia sat alone in her apartment, unable to sleep. Daniel found her at the kitchen table around 2 a.m. She looked exhausted. Broken. "I wasted so much time," she whispered. Daniel sat beside her quietly. Sophia stared at the floor. "I thought there would always be another chance." Daniel didn't know what to say, because sometimes there are no words powerful enough for regret, only silence and pain. Grief changed Sophia in quiet ways, not dramatic ways people could easily see, but small things. She stopped calling people back quickly. She spent longer staring out windows. Some nights she drove around the city with no destination at all, and every now and then, she replayed the argument with her father in her head, over and over again, as if changing the memory could somehow change reality. Daniel tried his best to help her heal, but grief is strange. Sometimes the people who love us most can only stand beside our pain, not remove it. One rainy evening, Daniel found Sophia sitting on the bedroom floor surrounded by old boxes. Photos, birthday cards, childhood drawings, memories. Sophia held one picture tightly in her hands. It showed her sitting on her father's shoulders at a carnival, both of them laughing. She stared at it for a long time before finally speaking. "I don't remember the last normal conversation we had." Daniel sat beside her quietly. Sophia swallowed hard. "Isn't that terrible?" "No," Daniel said softly. "It's human." But Sophia shook her head. "No. What's terrible is thinking you have time." That sentence stayed with her. Thinking you have time. Most people live that way. Postponing apologies. Delaying conversations. Assuming another chance will always come later. Until one day, later disappears. Months passed after the funeral. Slowly, Sophia tried rebuilding herself. She returned to work, started smiling more often, began allowing herself to feel happiness again without guilt. And through all of it, Daniel stayed patient, never forcing her to move on, making her feel broken for grieving too long. Sometimes healing doesn't happen because pain disappears. Sometimes it happens because someone stays beside you while you carry it. One night, Daniel surprised her with dinner on the apartment rooftop. Nothing expensive, just takeout food, city lights, soft music from his phone speaker. Sophia laughed for the first time in weeks, real laughter. Daniel smiled watching her. "There she is." Sophia looked at him. "What?" "The girl I fell in love with." Her smile faded slightly. "What if she's changed too much?" Daniel reached for her hand. "We all change." He paused. "But pain doesn't erase who you are." Sophia looked down quietly. Then Daniel took a deep breath. "I've actually been carrying something around for months." Sophia frowned slightly. "What?" Daniel stood slowly, nervous, and suddenly, Sophia realized what was happening. "Oh my God," Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Okay, this was supposed to sound smoother in my head." Despite herself, Sophia smiled. Then Daniel pulled out a small velvet box, and for a brief moment, the world felt light again. "Sophia," his voice trembled slightly, "you've seen me at my best and worst. You stayed when life became messy. You taught me that love isn't perfection. It's choosing someone again and again." His eyes softened. "And I want to keep choosing you." Sophia was already crying quietly. "Will you marry me?" For a second, she couldn't answer, not because she didn't love him, but because happiness felt unfamiliar after grief, like trying to walk again after surviving a storm. Daniel noticed the hesitation immediately. "You don't have to answer now," he said gently. But Sophia shook her head. Then, through tears, she smiled. "Yes." Daniel laughed in relief as she hugged him tightly. And for the first time in a long while, Sophia allowed herself to believe life could still hold beautiful things. Wedding planning began months later. Flowers, venues, guest lists, music, normal things. Happy things. But grief kept appearing in small, unexpected moments, especially whenever someone mentioned fathers. "Who's walking you down the aisle?" That question hurt every single time. Sophia usually forced a smile before changing the subject, because the truth was, she still hadn't fully accepted he was gone. One afternoon, while shopping for her wedding dress, Sophia overheard another bride arguing playfully with her dad on the phone. "Dad, stop crying already," the girl laughed. Sophia smiled at first. Then suddenly, her eyes filled with tears. She walked into the dressing room and cried quietly alone. Not because she wasn't happy, but because grief and happiness sometimes exist together. And nobody really prepares you for that. A few weeks before the wedding, Sophia visited her childhood home for the first time since the funeral. The house looked smaller than she remembered. Quiet, too. Dust floated through the sunlight near the windows. Everything felt frozen in time. Her father's coffee mug still sat near the sink. His reading glasses rested beside an old newspaper. Sophia walked slowly through the rooms, like she was visiting memories instead of a house. Then she entered his bedroom and froze. On the nightstand beside his bed was a framed photo of her. Not an old childhood photo, a recent one she had posted online years ago. Sophia picked it up carefully. Her throat tightened, because despite the silence, despite the argument, despite the years apart, he still kept her close. Then she noticed something else. A small notebook partially hidden inside the drawer. Sophia opened it slowly. Inside were short handwritten thoughts. Some were grocery reminders, random memories. But one page made her stop breathing. It simply said, "I miss my daughter. I just don't know how to fix this anymore." Sophia covered her mouth instantly as tears rolled down her face. Because suddenly, she understood something painful. Her father wasn't emotionally distant because he didn't care. He was emotionally limited because he didn't know how to communicate love properly. And sadly, many people are exactly the same. That night, Sophia drove home in silence, holding the notebook tightly the entire way. And deep down, she made herself a promise. If she ever had children, one day, they would never have to question whether they were loved. Never. The morning of the wedding arrived quietly. Soft sunlight slipped through the hotel curtains. Birds chirped faintly outside. Somewhere downstairs, workers prepared tables and flowers for the ceremony. Everything looked peaceful, but Sophia barely slept. She lay awake most of the night, staring at the ceiling, thinking, remembering, feeling the strange mix of excitement and sadness sitting together inside her chest. At 6:14 a.m., she finally gave up trying to sleep. She walked slowly toward the window, holding a cup of coffee. Outside, the garden looked beautiful. Rows of white chairs stood perfectly arranged beneath golden lights. It looked exactly like the wedding she used to imagine as a little girl. Back then, whenever Sophia talked about getting married someday, her father always joked about one thing: "No man is good enough for my daughter." She used to laugh every time, and secretly, she loved hearing it. Sophia closed her eyes tightly. For a second, she could almost hear his voice again. And somehow, that hurt more than silence. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Rachel entered, carrying breakfast and makeup supplies. "Bride survival kit," she announced dramatically. Sophia smiled faintly. "You're a lifesaver." Rachel placed everything down carefully before touching Sophia's face. "You didn't sleep?" Sophia sighed. "Was it that obvious?" Rachel sat beside her gently. "You're thinking about him, not a question, a fact." Sophia looked down at her coffee quietly. "I thought today would feel happier." Rachel nodded slowly. "It can be both." Sophia frowned slightly. "What? You can miss someone deeply and still allow yourself to be happy." Sophia stayed silent, because part of her still felt guilty for moving forward, as if healing somehow meant leaving her father behind. The bridal suite slowly filled with noise as the morning continued. Hairstylists arrived. Music played softly. Bridesmaids laughed while taking photos. For everyone else, it was a celebration. For Sophia, it felt emotional in ways she couldn't fully explain. Around noon, Sophia finally put on her dress. The room fell silent immediately. Even Rachel looked emotional. "Oh my God!" Sophia stared at herself in the mirror. White silk, soft lace sleeves, simple elegance. For a moment, she looked exactly like the version of herself she imagined years ago. The version her father was supposed to see. And suddenly, the emptiness returned. Strong, heavy, unavoidable. Rachel noticed tears forming instantly. She stepped closer carefully. Sophia shook her head quickly. "I'm okay." But her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, and everyone in the room knew she wasn't. One of the bridesmaids spoke softly. "Your dad would be proud of you today." That sentence broke something inside her immediately, because for years, that was all Sophia ever wanted to hear directly from him. Just once. She turned away quickly, pretending to fix her makeup. But Rachel gently grabbed her hand. "You don't have to hide your feelings today." Sophia looked down. "I just wish." Her voice faded. Rachel waited quietly. Sophia swallowed hard. "I wish we had more time." The room became silent, because almost everyone understood that feeling. The painful realization that love often gets interrupted by time. An hour later, guests began arriving. Elegant dresses, black suits, warm smiles. Outside, soft piano music floated through the garden. Daniel stood nervously near the altar, pretending to look calm, but his hands betrayed him completely. Even the officiant smiled. "You look terrified." Daniel laughed nervously. I am. Meanwhile, Sophia stood hidden, behind the entrance doors, waiting for the ceremony to begin. Her heartbeat felt impossibly loud. Rachel squeezed her shoulder gently. You ready? Sophia nodded slowly. Then the doors opened slightly, and that's when she saw it. The chair. Second row, white ribbon tied carefully around it. A single white rose resting softly on the seat. Everything inside her stopped. At first, she thought maybe she was imagining it. But no, the chair was real, and immediately, she knew who it was for. Her father. Sophia stared at it, unable to move. Guests continued talking softly. Music played. Cameras flashed. But all she could see was that chair. Empty, waiting, silent. Her breathing became uneven. Rachel noticed immediately. Sophia? No response. Sophia slowly walked toward the ceremony area. Step by step, eyes locked on the chair the entire time. And then, she noticed something hidden beneath the white rose. An envelope. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The paper looked slightly old, like it had been written long ago. Sophia stared at the handwriting on the front. And instantly, her chest tightened, because she recognized it immediately. It was her father's handwriting. Suddenly, the sounds around her faded again. The laughter, the music, the voices. None of it mattered anymore. All that existed in that moment was the letter trembling in her hands, and the terrifying question inside her mind. How was this possible? Sophia's hands shook as she held the envelope. For a moment, she couldn't breathe properly. Her father's handwriting stared back at her like a ghost from another lifetime. Simple, familiar, careful. Just seeing it again made her emotional instantly. Rachel stepped closer. What is it? Sophia barely whispered the answer. It's from my dad. Rachel's eyes widened softly. What? But Sophia couldn't explain anything yet, because her heart was beating too loudly. The envelope looked slightly worn around the edges, like it had been carried somewhere for a long time. Sophia slowly opened it while trying to steady her breathing. Inside was a folded letter, and attached to it, a small photograph. Sophia stared at the picture immediately. It was old, very old. She couldn't have been older than 7 years old in it. She sat on her father's shoulders at the beach, laughing while holding melting ice cream. Both of them smiling like the world had never hurt them before. Sophia felt tears rush into her eyes instantly, because she remembered that exact day. Her father drove 3 hours, just because she once casually mentioned wanting to see the ocean. Back then, love looked simple, effortless. Rachel gently touched her arm. Sophia, the ceremony. But Sophia barely heard her. Slowly, she unfolded the letter. And then she began reading. If you're reading this, then there's a good chance I'm no longer around to say these things myself. Sophia's lips trembled immediately. I asked Rachel to give you this on your wedding day, not because I wanted to make you sad, but because I didn't want the happiest day of your life to also carry unanswered questions. Sophia looked up at Rachel in shock. Rachel's eyes filled with tears. He gave it to me before he passed, she whispered softly. Sophia stared at her speechless. You never told me. Rachel swallowed hard. He asked me not to unless the time felt right. Sophia looked back down at the letter, her vision blurred from tears. Sophia, if I could relive one moment in my life, it would be our last argument. The words hit her like a wave. Not because you hurt me, but because I should have listened better. Sophia covered her mouth instantly. People nearby continued smiling and chatting, completely unaware that her world was quietly breaking open again. Parents like to believe they always know what's best. Sometimes we mistake fear for wisdom. I was afraid of losing you, and instead of admitting that, I tried controlling you. Sophia's tears fell harder now, because for years, she thought her father died angry with her. But this letter sounded different. Gentler, honest, human. When you left home, the house became too quiet. I kept expecting to hear your footsteps upstairs, or your terrible singing in the kitchen. Sophia laughed softly through tears, because she really did sing, terribly. And her father used to complain about it constantly, but secretly, he always smiled while doing it. I wanted to call you many times, more times than you probably know, but pride is a dangerous thing, especially for fathers who grew up believing emotions should stay hidden. Sophia closed her eyes tightly. That sentence explained everything. Her father came from a generation where men rarely spoke openly about feelings. Love was shown through working long hours, fixing broken things, driving across town at midnight when your car stopped working. Not through emotional conversations. And suddenly, Sophia realized how unfairly she had judged him sometimes. The letter continued. I know there were moments you felt unsupported by me. I know I made mistakes, but please believe this. There was never a single day I wasn't proud to be your father. Sophia completely broke down crying. Years. She spent years wondering if her father was disappointed in her. And all along, he was proud of her the entire time. He just didn't know how to say it properly. Rachel hugged her gently while Sophia cried quietly into her shoulder. Around them, guests still laughed and took photos completely unaware of the emotional storm unfolding nearby. And somehow, that made the moment feel even more real. Because grief rarely pauses the world. It simply exists quietly inside people, while life continues moving around them. After a few moments, Sophia wiped her tears carefully. But she wasn't finished reading. There was still more. And deep down, she felt the rest of the letter might change her forever. Daniel seems like a good man. I noticed the way he looked at you the day I met him. A father notices those things. Sophia smiled through tears. If he still looks at you that way today, don't let fear ruin something beautiful. Sophia's breathing slowed, because suddenly, she understood something important. This letter wasn't only about regret. It was also about permission. Permission to move forward. Permission to stop carrying guilt forever. Permission to be happy again. Then she reached the final section, and the final lines completely shattered her heart. One day you may become a parent too, and if that day comes, remember this, love is not always spoken perfectly. Some people love with words, others love with sacrifice, others love by simply staying. Sophia cried silently, reading the next sentence. I may not have always said the right things, but every good part of me loved every part of you. Her hands trembled as she read the final line. And Sophia, in case you still wonder, I was always proud of you. Sophia closed the letter slowly, and for the first time in 3 years, the guilt inside her chest finally began to loosen. Not disappear completely, but soften, like pain finally allowing itself to breathe. Outside, the wedding music began playing softly again. The ceremony was about to start. Rachel wiped tears from her face. You okay? Sophia looked down at the empty chair, then at the letter, then toward the aisle waiting ahead of her. And quietly, through tears, she smiled. Yes, she whispered. I think I finally am. The music began softly, gentle piano floating through the evening air. Guests slowly stood to their feet, some smiling, some already emotional. And at the entrance of the aisle, Sophia took one final deep breath. For years, she imagined this moment differently. She imagined her father standing beside her, making nervous jokes, pretending not to cry. But life rarely unfolds exactly the way people expect. Sometimes, love remains present even through absence. Rachel squeezed her hand gently. You ready? Sophia looked toward the empty chair one last time. The white rose still rested quietly on the seat. Her father's letter remained folded carefully in her hands. And strangely, the chair no longer felt empty anymore. Not really. Because for the first time in years, Sophia no longer felt abandoned by his silence. Now she understood him. Not perfectly, but enough. Enough to finally let go of the anger. Enough to remember the love louder than the regret. Slowly, she began walking down the aisle. Every step felt emotional. The guests blurred around her. The lights, the flowers, the music. None of it mattered as much as the feeling growing quietly inside her chest. Peace. Not perfect peace, but healing, real healing. Daniel looked at her like she was the only person in the world, and when their eyes met, Sophia immediately started crying again. Not from sadness this time, but because after years of carrying guilt, she finally allowed herself to feel happiness without apologizing for it. Daniel smiled softly. You look beautiful, he whispered as she reached him. Sophia laughed through tears. You're crying too. I'm trying not to. You're failing. Daniel smiled. Badly. For the first time all day, Sophia laughed fully. And somehow, that small laugh felt like sunlight finally entering a room that had been dark for years. The ceremony began quietly. The officiant spoke about love, about commitment, patience, forgiveness. And when he mentioned forgiveness, Sophia's eyes drifted toward the empty chair again. Because suddenly she understood something most people realize too late. Relationships don't end because love disappears. Many times, they end because pride speaks louder than vulnerability. Because people wait too long to say, I miss you, I'm sorry, I love you, I was wrong. And sometimes, time runs out before the conversation ever happens. Halfway through the ceremony, Sophia gently unfolded the letter again beneath her bouquet. Her eyes landed on one line. Every good part of me loved every part of you. She closed her eyes tightly, and in that moment, she silently forgave both of them. Her father for struggling to express emotions, and herself for waiting too long. When it was finally time for vows, Sophia's hands trembled slightly. Daniel smiled reassuringly. "You don't have to make it perfect." Sophia nodded softly. Then she began speaking. "Daniel." Her voice cracked instantly. The guests smiled gently. Sophia laughed nervously before continuing. "I used to think love meant never hurting each other." She paused. "But life taught me something different." She glanced briefly toward the empty chair. "Love is imperfect. Sometimes people love deeply and still fail each other. Sometimes fear gets in the way. Sometimes pride does." Her eyes filled with tears again. "But real love keeps trying anyway." Daniel squeezed her hands tightly. Sophia smiled softly through tears. "You stayed beside me during the worst parts of my life. You never rushed my healing. You never treated my sadness like a burden. And after everything, you still chose me." Daniel's eyes watered completely now. "And I promise," Sophia whispered softly, "to keep choosing you too." There wasn't a single dry eye left among the guests. Even the officiant looked emotional. And somewhere inside herself, Sophia felt something finally settle peacefully. Not because grief disappeared, but because grief no longer controlled her. After the ceremony ended, the reception lights glowed warmly across the garden. Music played. People danced. Laughter filled the air. And for the first time in years, Sophia allowed herself to enjoy the moment fully. Not halfway. Not with guilt. Fully. Later that night, while everyone celebrated inside, Sophia quietly stepped outside alone. The air felt cool against her skin. She walked slowly toward the empty chair. The white rose still rested there untouched. Sophia sat down beside it gently, then looked up at the night sky. "You were right about one thing," she whispered softly. A small smile crossed her face. "He really does love me." Tears filled her eyes again. "But you were wrong about one thing, too." She laughed quietly through emotion. "I didn't ruin my life." The wind moved softly through the garden, and somehow, for the first time since his death, Sophia no longer felt like she was speaking to silence. Before returning inside, she carefully placed the letter against her chest, then whispered the words she wished she had said years earlier. "I love you too, Dad." Years later, Sophia would tell this story to her children, not as a story about sadness, but as a story about timing, about forgiveness, about emotional honesty, about the danger of assuming there will always be another chance. And every anniversary, she and Daniel placed a white rose beside an empty chair during dinner, not to mourn, but to remember, because some people leave this world without ever realizing how deeply they were loved, and others stay alive without realizing how deeply they were loved back. Moral of the story: never let pride become stronger than love. Say the words while you still can, because one of the greatest tragedies in life is discovering how much someone cared only after they're gone. And maybe someone watching this right now needed to hear this story today. Maybe there's a conversation you've been postponing. Maybe there's someone you still miss. Maybe there's love hiding behind silence. If this story touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments. What's something you wish you had said before it became too late? And if emotional stories like this stay with you long after they end, subscribe to the Untold Cost, because here we tell the stories people feel deeply but rarely talk about. And before you leave, watch the next story, because sometimes one story helps you understand pain, but the next one helps you heal from it.